And there he was, live, live. Hello. I've got a different location for you today. For those watching this, you think, I'm fairly used to Neil Long's background. Well, it's a different background. I am in my studio, my brand new studio, which is very nice. Do a quick guided tour. Right, here we go. That's the patio doors that were there before. But look, we have curtains. It's actually going to be the warmest room in the house, and we do. And I've even got one of these as well. Every self-respecting studio should have a freezer with snacks on it. No, an on-air sign. Anyway, more importantly, this is MRS. This is Men's Radio Station. Hello, and a very, very good afternoon to you. It's Neil on a Wednesday. We're going to be talking about tinnitus today. Special guest who I'm going to get on, and I can't wait to get them on the show. So let's do it. Let's get them on the show straight away. Hello, Nick.
Hello, Neil. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad.
So, first of all, forgive me for not knowing this, because the knowledge of you being on the show came to me a couple of days ago, and we have curtains that draw themselves automatically in the background. Did you see that as well?
It's magic, isn't it?
It's quite an effect, isn't it? Yeah, just to freak you out. Alexa, draw the curtains. Not really.
You'll pay for that later.
I have, and I've actually started the real Alexa talking. Has told me that she's not sure about that. I really need to turn that off. Right, enough. How long are you with us for? Are you here? You're very welcome to stay for the hour, or are you just booked for a short period of time?
I have got as much time as you want.
Okay, and in that case, let's just chat for as much time as you can, because it's an important subject, and I know a lot of people. It's just that some people are booked to a strict 10 minutes, and I just kind of needed to know that.
Today, it's tapering off a little bit, Neil. If you'd wanted to speak to me on Monday, you would have had a very strict deadline, but today it's a little bit quieter.
Fair enough. Well, it's always worth asking the question, isn't it? Yeah. So, Nic Wray, welcome to the show. We just do a few hellos to folks tuned in. First of all, we've got Robert Van Buren. Hello, Neil. Hello to you. Any other comments or questions, by the way? Perhaps you are a sufferer from tinnitus. We will be happy to answer. I'm sure Nick will be happy to answer them today, these questions. First of all, very briefly, are you a sufferer yourself? Is that how you got into this work?
It isn't really. I mean, my background has always been comms and marketing, and before I came to Tinnitus UK, I actually worked for a community circus. So there you go. But I get it from time to time. I have it in my.
You work for what? Sorry.
I worked for a community circus.
What is community circus?
We trained young people who were not in education, or children who had perhaps went into schools and taught them circus skills, because it can help with their learning. So that was my background. That was my immediate background.
That's fantastic. I've literally never heard of that. Why have I not heard of that before?
So yeah, but I mean, I'd had tinnitus in my 20s due to an ear infection, and it drove me very, very distracted. It was very painful. It was very distressing.
So what's it like?
And then it went.
So is it this constant loud ringing in the ear? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, it can be. Everybody's tinnitus is different. So mine comes, if I've got an ear infection, yes, I experience tinnitus, but it then goes. But for other people, it's 24/7. Now, for some of these people, it's just background. The brain filters it out. It might be annoying if their attention is drawn to it, but otherwise it's livable with. But for some people, it's really distressing, and it can have a big impact on their mental health and well-being. And that's really what this report highlighted for us. We did the study because at Tinnitus UK we've got a helpline, we've got web chat, we've got email support, and the type of calls and contacts we were getting from people were talking. They changed. They started changing in the pandemic, but the numbers of people who were talking to us about their mental health, about how they were feeling and how bad they were feeling, had really increased. So we wanted to just see what the situation actually was, because obviously a helpline, it might be a little bit biased. So we did this study, and although I knew how badly people can be affected, the results still kind of surprised me, because last time we'd done this, the numbers were a wee bit different. And so of the respondents coming back to us, 8 out of 10 people were saying that they were experiencing low mood or anxiety. 7 out of 10 were saying that they felt helpless or they felt hopeless. 86% of people were saying they were struggling getting to sleep or staying asleep. And then, you know, I think most distressing was the figure that 1 in 5 people of our respondents said that they'd had thoughts of harming themselves in some way, or
So
even
this just
thoughts of
brings home
suicide.
how much, I suppose, unless you've experienced it, you wouldn't know. It's just
Yeah,
it's just a word to people who haven't experienced it. Oh,
yeah,
tinnitus! It's that ringing in the ear. But
yeah.
first of all, describe what it is like. I mean, from its mildest to its most
Yeah,
distressing.
I mean, everybody experiences tinnitus differently. It's as individual as, you know, the 7.5 million people that experience it in the UK. So
Yeah.
some people describe it as ringing. Some people will say it's buzzing or whining, or it's a noise in time to their heartbeat. Small
Wow.
children experience it. Some of their descriptions are amazing. They're very creative. You know, a child might say that it sounds like angry bees or like Rice Krispies popping. Some people even hear snatches of music, a bit like an earworm, but an earworm that just doesn't go. You know, and isn't related to the song you heard on the breakfast show that morning. You know, it can be
Like a
completely
really
random.
bad earworm of a song you don't want to hear ever again, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few years ago, I remember a news story that went out. I think it must have been in the summer where news is quiet, that a woman musical tinnitus was a mix of How Much Is That Doggy in the Window and God Save the Queen. And, you know,
Well,
you
that
can
sounds like a
smile
doggy, yeah.
about it, but it isn't funny. I mean, she was incredibly distressed by it. We know the person who was treating with her, and he was saying it had a massive impact.
Well, yeah. I mean, it sounds light-hearted, but unless you're experiencing it, played
Well,
on full volume, 24 hours a day, then it's not so funny.
Well, and that's the other thing, is that a lot of our respondents were saying that people didn't understand what they were going through.
Mm.
So, you know, about half of them were saying that. And I think that's actually quite key, because if you can't rely on your friends and family to kind of be supportive, have some kind of empathy, then it just makes life a lot more difficult. When you're putting up with things like lack of sleep, when your mood has tanked, that can be really difficult to live with. And I think, you know, like many invisible disabilities, and tinnitus does fit the criteria for an invisible
Of
disability,
course it does, yeah.
people don't, obviously they don't see it, they don't know what you're going through. And it's not like somebody could put their ear against their friend's head and hear what they're hearing. Nobody can hear what you're hearing.
Do we know what causes it?
We know some of the causes.
Go on.
We don't know all of them, and sometimes it seems to be triggered for no reason whatsoever. I mean, one of the main causes is hearing loss. Now, that can be the hearing loss we all experience as we get older. You know, our hearing get the hair cells in our inner ears wear and tear. They've been around for a long time, you know, and our hearing can deteriorate. A big and preventable cause is actually noise-induced hearing loss. So, you know, if you're going to gigs, if you're doing DIY, if you're working in construction, say, hearing protection is absolutely key. Protect your hearing so that that isn't the trigger for tinnitus. We know that something simple like having your hearing muffled because you've got an ear infection or earwax buildup, that can trigger tinnitus. Stress and anxiety can. Some cancer treatments can, because they're poisonous to the inner ear. They're what's known as ototoxic. And we also know there's a link between COVID-19 and tinnitus has been recognized as a symptom of long COVID.
Goodness me. So it could be a myriad of things.
It could
So
it could be all kinds of things, and it can be nothing. I mean, it can sometimes be triggered by life changes. I mean, we know that tinnitus is often triggered by a change in our mental and emotional well-being, or also in our physical well-being. So sometimes it might be triggered by, you've got a rise in your blood pressure, or you've got some other kind of illness. Sometimes it's stress and anxiety, you're going through a tough time at work. Sometimes it's a life change. People, when they retire and they're also doing less things, they're also in quieter environments maybe, then that's a big time when people start thinking, oh, I'm hearing something I shouldn't be. Pregnancy is another one. Menopause is another one. There's it's such an individual condition. There's so many triggers and things behind
I'm
it.
amazed that there's so many. So if someone is suffering from it, obviously their first port of call is to go to the GP, and the GP will. Are any of these treatable, preventable? I suppose some are.
Yes, some are. I mean, and it's key to go to your GP just to make sure there isn't a physical cause behind it, particularly, and these are the sort of, what we call red flags. If your tinnitus is single-sided, if you've had a sudden hearing loss, I mean, if you suddenly lose your hearing anyway, get seen as soon as possible.
Well,
if it's in time to your heartbeat, if there's any pain, because tinnitus shouldn't be painful. So those, and also if you're feeling dizzy or have got vertigo, those are all kind of things that it would be really important. Go to your GP as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Other than that, the GP is kind of the gateway to getting you further help and support. So, for example, if you're suspecting you losing a bit of hearing, or your family's telling you you're losing a bit of hearing, they can get you into audiology systems, and we can get you sorted with hearing aids, and also audiologists are the people who can provide the sort of professional support for managing tinnitus. And then, while you're waiting for this to happen, or if you want to know more about what is happening, then organisations like ourselves at Tinnitus UK, then we can provide help and information and support too.
Yeah, sure. And it's good to know these resources are there. I mean, I'm just thinking, if it's at its worst, and perhaps even worse than that, you don't know what's causing it, but you've got this constant noise inside your head, which no one else can hear.
Yeah, and I think
I can understand why people would be depressed, or perhaps 1 in 5 want to harm themselves.
And I think sometimes that's why people do feel like they do, because it is so strange, and also it's such an unknown. And quite often people do feel better for just actually knowing what it is, and knowing that it's not generally a symptom that of anything serious. It's not a symptom of a mental illness. You're not hearing voice, even if you're hearing music, it's not a mental illness.
No, it's a physical thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually generated in the brain, but it's part of the auditory system that's a wee bit faulty. So actually, sometimes when people know what it is, and actually especially children can quite easily habituate, that they're very accepting of it. So once you actually know a little bit more, and then you can start taking control, because a lot of the management techniques that you use for tinnitus are things within your control, and are things that you need to do, because the doctor can't write out a prescription for you for it. They can maybe write the prescription for, if you need something to help you sleep, or if you need something for your low mood, but there isn't a drug for tinnitus.
It's interesting, isn't it, Nick?
It's endlessly fascinating. I mean, you asked me how long I could talk here, and I could probably be here all day.
Well, we can certainly keep you on for the hour. I'd be absolutely delighted to. Plus, it's an important topic to talk about it, because I can understand how it does affect mental well-being hugely. And I think you hit on something that's really important that we touch on MRS here an awful lot. And I've said this an awful lot. When you've got any kind of condition, it feels like you're the only one in the world. Just to find out it's got a name, and you're not the only one, even if it doesn't solve the problem, there is a certain amount of relief in that. For a start, it does. When I found out that I had OCD, and to find out that it had a name, and I wasn't evil or going crazy or all the terrible things that I thought I was, because when you don't know what's going on, it's easy for your imagination to get going. I thought when I had OCD that I was a bad person, I was going crazy. None of those things are true. It's just and to hear you say it's not part of a mental illness, you're not going crazy.
You're
You're
not
not
going
imagining
crazy.
it. You're not, it's not some awful thing that only you can hear. And
Yeah, I mean,
let's say it's like it's some weird film or something,
yeah. I mean, the thing with tinnitus is the sounds are compellingly real. It's almost and tinnitus has been kind of likened to phantom limb pain. If somebody's had their limb amputated, maybe through an accident, or they've been injured, soldiers in particular, military personnel, they say that they can still feel the amputated limb. That's kind of similar to where tinnitus is. It's very real. And also, I think, again, you hit on when you said that people think sometimes they're the only one. Tinnitus is really common. There's 1 in 7 people have experienced sort of persistent tinnitus. So if you are, round the table at the pub, it's likely one of you or more of you have got tinnitus. If you go into a bus, buses take about 70, 60 people. There's going to be, yeah, on that bus who've got this problem, and yet people very rarely talk about it. And
and
I
yet
think
we
this is
feel
where,
so isolated. And yet the
yeah,
truth, and
yeah,
the truth, it couldn't
absolutely.
be further from the truth, could it?
No, I mean, I've done a little bit of media this week for Tinnitus Week, and somebody messaged on our social media to say they'd not spoken to anybody about tinnitus for 30 years, but now they were going to go and see their GP. And that's kind of where it hits. It hits us right. It hits us right here. We're thinking this is why we're doing it, because there are people who have sat and suffered in not silence, if you know what I mean. They've
Yes.
not talked about it. They've buried it deep inside, and they're living with it, and probably putting a brave face on everything.
And they've
And
been doing that for
actually,
so long, and there was
yeah.
possibly no need to, even if they couldn't get a cure, they could at least feel some kind of kinship, I
Well,
suppose.
this is and there are people. There are groups of people. We have tinnitus support groups around the country. We also have support groups online, because we know they're not always easy to get to, and you particularly if they meet on a dark evening in winter, that kind of thing. And
Sure.
some of the groups as well are specialists. So we have a group for musicians that meets online, for example, because they've got a certain set of challenges in living with tinnitus and doing the
Oh
work they
yes,
do.
right.
So actually just sometimes talking to other people, you take, like you say, kinship, but you can share tips, you can talk, even if you just say, I'm having a really bad day, you can get empathy, which perhaps you're not getting from your friends and family, because they don't realize just exactly what it is.
The extent of the problem, yeah,
Yeah, and the
because they're
extent
not
of the
experiencing
problem.
it themselves.
Mm.
Now, something I wanted to ask here. We talk about on this show NLP, which I'm sure you're familiar with, neuro linguistic programming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one thing I've learned in NLP is the unconscious mind, if you like, doesn't know the difference between something that's vividly imagined or real.
Yeah.
Now, and there's proven science on this, like they've asked people to imagine playing the piano or actually playing, and the same set of neurons in the brain
Yeah.
lights up. So there's a part of the brain that doesn't kind of know the difference. And it's weird because we're processing this conversation through our brains and we know the difference, but there's a part of us that doesn't, but it's a part of us. So how do we not know? And it's a bit of a deep question. It's a bit
Yeah,
kind
I
of down
mean,
the rabbit hole. I'll give you that. But are there any potential treatments
yeah,
that could be based on this principle? You say you used the phrase earlier, the auditory system within the
yeah,
brain. And
yeah.
that sounded very NLP like to me. And I'm just wondering if there's any kind of pioneering treatments that we may not know about.
Yeah, well, actually, NLP is something that hasn't really been looked at. There are more and more things that are being looked at. A few years
Maybe,
ago,
maybe, maybe we're going to start a whole new paradigm here on the show.
maybe
This maybe this was
maybe
meant to happen. This conversation.
maybe we do. Maybe we need to get an NLP practitioner to look into tinnitus, but because we've been looking at various
You're looking
types.
at one. I am one of those.
Cool. Well, there you go.
There you go. Although I
Um,
don't do as much fit, I don't do very much fit anymore. There's better people than me. But anyway, you were saying.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the things, I mean, we know there are certain and proven treatments, and in terms of actually looking at people's mental health, emotional well-being, cognitive behavioral therapy is probably the most researched tinnitus treatment, and actually down as the most effective. And I think the issue with things like CBT is actually access to them, particularly in this country, because there's such a demand. Other things, I think it's about 4 or 5 years ago, a couple of researchers at University College London and the Royal National Ear, Nose and Throat Hospital were looking at mindfulness. And mindfulness, as you probably well aware, has been used basically in the West. It came really from John Kabat-Zinn and his work on chronic pain. And there are parallels between
the so-called godfather of mindfulness. And then I read the book by Professor Mark Williams and Danny Penman, who are studying it at Oxford, and that's what really pricked my ears up. If Oxford University are taking it seriously, and yes, there's great. I've heard this, that mindfulness, and you'd think, what could a technique like that? How could that possibly help chronic pain? And yet it does.
And it helps tinnitus. And it helps tinnitus better than existing management techniques.
How?
It's difficult. I think people, because we don't exactly know all the mechanisms of tinnitus, I think some of it is actually partly because some of the techniques are designed to reduce your stress levels, but some of them are also about how you think about your tinnitus and being accepting of it in the here and now, rather than worrying about all the guilt about what have you done to cause it, and then all the worry about how are you going to live with it going forward. When you're looking,
I suppose neither of those two things.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, I interrupted you. Carry on.
When you're looking at tinnitus mindfully, you're just in the here and now, and you're actually with your tinnitus and realizing, looking at its qualities, it's neutral. It's neither good nor bad. And so that changes.
You really hit on something here.
And that changes your emotional response, and that seems to be how it works. I'm not an expert, and I'm sure there are.
Let's go back. Let's just do that again. Let's just go through that again. So you're not, with mindfulness, you're not in the past or future. So you don't blame yourself, or what did I do to cause it? That's not useful. How am I going to live with it? That's past. How am I going to live with it? That's future. It's just being with it non-judgmentally in the present. And then you've hit on something really beautiful there. You said, well, it's neutral, and possibly, it's hard, bit of a stretch, but all circumstances are neutral, and it's whatever we kind of project onto it. But if we've got this attitude that we're fighting, we're pushing against, it's that old what you resist persists. Therefore, the corollary of that must be what you accept and allow will not persist. Maybe it's that,
or you're not bothered about it and you can ignore it, and that's almost the same, because that's really what you're trying to do with your tinnitus. You're trying to take it away from your conscious perception, in the same way that if you live by a busy road, you move in, you think, oh my gosh, what have I done? I can't stand it. I can't live here another day. But your brain learns to filter that sound out because it's always the same. It's always there.
Yes.
And then you don't notice. A few weeks down the line, your mate from out of town comes and sits in your living room and goes, Neil, why did you move here? Are you going to be okay? I can't hear anything but that traffic. And you go, what traffic? Yeah. And that's really what you're trying to do with your tinnitus. You're trying to go, what tinnitus?
Well, it is also said that what you give your attention to increases. So the opposite must be true as well. So anything that could take your attention off of it, it's going to become lesser in your experience, isn't it?
And that's how some of the other management techniques work. So, for example, if you've got some hearing loss and you're not getting external sound, you're struggling to hear you and I, for example, you're going to be focused on your tinnitus because your brain is expecting a signal, is expecting to hear something. If it can't hear externally, it looks internally. So if you have hearing aids, or you have, you've got hearing loss, you wear hearing aids, then that is providing more sound. It's also a distraction because hopefully a conversation like the one we're having is more interesting than your tinnitus sound. And so for people who don't have a hearing loss, or even for some of those that do, adding more sound in, which we call sound enrichment, will take down the intrusiveness of the tinnitus, give the brain something else to focus on. So a lot of people, rather than sitting in a quiet room, for example, will have a little sound generator on so that there's something coming in all the time. And in fact, some hearing aids now are sound generators as well, so that people get the amplification, but they also get the background sound.
Wow. Every day's a school day. I did not know that, but now you've said it, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just,
I mean, it's tinnitus management, I think, is very practical. It is. Some people do wonder why we suggest things like background sound, why we suggest things like mindfulness, why we suggest things like relaxation techniques. They're all kind of going, well, isn't that a bit, well, wishy-washy? Can't you give me a pill? And yes, if we had a pill, we'd give you a pill, we'd tell you to take it, but there isn't one. But the techniques are designed to work with your brain, break this kind of emotional connection, and actually reduce the impact of your tinnitus.
That makes complete sense. And it's the closest thing we've got, I suppose, to a cure, isn't it?
Yeah,
there isn't a cure per se, but it's the closest thing, and it certainly goes in that direction, doesn't it?
Yeah, and one of our, he used to be our president, a chap called Tony Kay, who was head of audiology at Aintree Hospital, used to say, I can't take the sound away, but I can make you not care about it. And that's pretty much the same thing. And actually, I thought those are, they're really wise words, because if you don't care, then you can just get on with what you're doing and go and do something, as the old TV program said, go and do something more interesting instead.
Why don't you? I remember that.
Yes.
Because it's interesting, because at the moment, I've got anosmia. I can't smell or taste, right? But I go through big parts of the day not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there all the time, but it's not, because my attention's not on it. And it's only from time to time I think, God, that'd be nice. But so, and do you think that with the way it's going, that treatments will evolve to the point that it could be cured and treated I know that's a bit of a big question to ask, but as a guesstimate in the way things seem to be going?
I mean, there's certainly, and I'm actually writing a presentation to give this evening on tinnitus research. So very timely question. I think the direction of travel is great. There are a lot more people working in the field. It's still vastly under-researched. There's very little money going into it compared to other sort of comparable conditions. But the direction of travel, I think, is forward. There are organizations and companies who are looking at the kind of science and the brain science and coming out with devices, for example. There's still a way to go with these, but they're looking at things like bimodal stimulation. So they've got devices that play sound but also do nerve stimulation in different areas, the different devices. There's one under the tongue, there's one that looks at the vagus nerve in your neck, so there are things like that happening. And also people are looking at making some of these treatments more accessible, so that you don't have to find a mindfulness practitioner. It's an app in your phone that then also has sounds in it, also has information resources in there, because again, we've talked about information being key. So it's actually making the existing treatments more accessible. And there are people who are looking at potential novel treatments. Now, sadly, some of these sort of are pharmaceutical based and they've not worked out, but the theories are kind of there and people are working and people are looking. I've always said that I think, yes, there'll be something approaching a cure in the next 20 years, but I don't know what that would actually look like at the moment.
And at the moment, is it looking more the skills route, like the management, or the pills route, like the pharma?
Simply because of the length of time it takes to develop medication, unless we repurpose an existing medication, it's probably going to be skills and techniques, because I think one of the things that we might, where it is going to be promising, and I mean, this is just my personal opinion, is that I've said tinnitus is very individual, and I think that sometimes shows up in trial results, in that not everybody gets relief from a certain intervention, but that for people a particular intervention works for, it works very well. And actually, is that down to the type of tinnitus they have? And can we break those down? And then there might be different cures for different types of tinnitus. And I think that's probably to me, that's the most promising route. I'm sure some of my researcher friends may disagree with me. I don't know. But I think that could be where we go.
But it needs an awful lot more research.
It does.
To break it down into different types of tinnitus, that's really nuanced.
There's work happening with that at the moment. Particularly, there's a group of European researchers looking at that, and also looking at sort of biomarkers, so that, because at the moment you're diagnosed by tinnitus if you tell your medical professional that you're hearing these noises. There's no, it's not like, a blood test like you have for high cholesterol or for diabetes. It's really down to questionnaires as well about how severe they are, and then that changes, with your treatment. The effectiveness of the treatment is judged by how you answer a questionnaire on a particular day, so that's problematic as well. But
a lot of mental illnesses, not that tinnitus is a mental illness.
No, but I mean, I think anything.
But a lot of things are done that way, aren't they?
Yeah. Anything that's got questionnaire measures is it's what we've got, and it's the best that we've got, but we could possibly do better.
Yeah. If you just joined us, we're talking about tinnitus. If you literally just joined the show, it's not a mental illness. You're not hearing voices. You're not going crazy. And there are treatments that have been developed. They haven't got an outright cure, but there's certainly skills that can be taught which can greatly, greatly increase your quality of life with it. Is that a fair assessment so far?
I think that's a very fair assessment. The other thing,
and you're not alone. 1 in 7 people.
Alone, no. And I think the other thing I ought to say is, although tinnitus is related to hearing loss and quite commonly comes along with hearing loss, tinnitus in and of itself will not make you deaf. That's another kind of misconception. You may struggle to hear a bit more clearly, as you would if you were sort of in a busy room where, against background sound, but tinnitus itself is not going to damage your hearing, but it might be a sign that your hearing is damaged.
Interesting. So it's a symptom, not a cause.
It's a symptom, not a cause.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, where can people find you? Is it you're contactable on tinnitus.org.uk?
We're contactable on tinnitus.org.uk. Our email address is helpline@tinnitus.org.uk.
I'll put that on the screen. Bear with me.
Yeah. Okay. And we also have a telephone helpline as well, and I'll give you the number for that as well, Neil.
Please. So helpline at tinnitus. I don't mean type in tinnitus.co.uk.
At org.uk, yeah.
Org.uk, yeah.
Org.uk, yes.
Let's pop that on the screen. Helpline at tinnitus. I think I've spelled that right, haven't I?
Yes, you have.
Yes, I have.
And
a phone number?
Is 0800.
No, a free phone number to boot.
Free phone number to boot, yes. 018 0527. And our helpline, if you want to talk to a real life person, our helpline is 10 o'clock till 4 o'clock, Monday till Friday. If you go to our website, we have a chatbot, which hopefully it's designed not to be annoying. It's designed not to be like a customer service chatbot. But you can also then, from the chatbot, switch to a real life person as well during our working hours.
Well, this truly is groundbreaking. The first chatbot that's not annoying. I don't know how you've done that.
It's called Axel. It was named after the puppy of one of the project team, and it basically guides you through some of the information. It's not fully AI. It's not going to, it's not going to go off on a life of its own and tell you its own problems. but it will kind of guide you through our website because there's so much information there. And like I say, you can then segue seamlessly into one of the team if you've got further questions.
Well, it's good to know that there's the real people there that will talk to you. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just this whole thing of knowing you're not alone. I mean, it really took me back, maybe, brought me up short when you said people have suffered for 30 years and have felt alone with this for 30 years.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to.
Yeah, I mean, there was one chap, this is another chap, but we came across him when we did a research project into veterans. And this guy, Arthur, was a Chelsea pensioner. And he'd been a regimental sergeant major. And he'd had tinnitus for years. And he was absolutely petrified that if he talked to anybody in his service, he'd be thrown out of the army. So he didn't tell his family, he didn't tell his daughters. And it was only
he'll be thrown out of the army for talking about having tinnitus.
Well, he thought that he'd fail a hearing test and so be thrown out. It wasn't so much the talking about it, because obviously it would be just the disclosure of having it. Now, that's actually not the case. I mean, the army is very good and very supportive if you've got hearing loss or if you've got tinnitus, or certainly is these days. I mean, Arthur goes back a bit, he won't mind me telling you that, but we had advertised at the Chelsea Hospital that we wanted to talk to veterans, and so he saw the flyer and he thought he'd give it a go, and he went and talked to Georgie, our researcher, and it was the first time he'd ever talked to somebody about his tinnitus.
All because of a fear.
Yeah, and this guy was a regimental sergeant major. Then they're not exactly the nervous type, are they?
And no, they're not scared of anything apart from failing a hearing test.
Yeah. And from that and that conversation, they're looked after incredibly well at the Chelsea Hospital. So he got a hearing aid, he got support with his tinnitus, and he's kind of like, I can hear when I walk down the corridor, I can hear my footsteps.
I know. Stuff that we would normally take for granted.
Yeah.
But isn't that amazing after all these years?
Yeah. And, that's when we're having a tough day, when we're sort of bogged down in, I'm trying to get a news story out, or a piece of writing's not going very well, and I'm thinking, what am I doing this for? And I'm thinking, I'm doing it for Arthur. I'm doing it for my dad. I'm doing it for these people who are struggling, and that's kind of where we are, because we know this is the reality for a lot of people. And we know, I mean, our report isn't reflective of everybody with tinnitus. We don't want people here thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be miserable the rest of my life because I've got tinnitus. That's not the case, but we want to get the people's stories out who are suffering.
No, I think it's great work that you're doing. I think we've touched on so many really important things, a lot of which we talk about here on MRS quite a lot today. And the one you just touched on there is almost the stigma. I mean, I'm not saying it's we've established more than once, it's not a mental health condition, but when it comes to it can affect mental health.
Yeah, but also I think you're
but also
right.
there's a massive stigma about talking about mental health or anything connected with it. Like the Chelsea pensioner chap, Arthur, he was scared that he'd fail a hearing test, and then he was worried about that, and then that whole fear blocked him from doing anything about it, and he suffered perhaps unnecessarily for years. So it's breaking down the stigma. No, you're not going to get thrown out of your job. You're not going to have people think you're going doolally. Well, nothing bad. These things that you fear aren't going to happen. Is what I'm trying to say.
And we're talking about stigma, and one of the things that we notice, we quite often get asked, why don't you have somebody famous fronting the charity and talking about their tinnitus?
Good question. Why don't you?
Yeah, because a lot of them, particularly if they're in the music industry, won't talk about it publicly. Some people that do talk about it, Susanna Reid this morning on Good Morning Breakfast, she's got other charities she's involved with. That's fine. That's fair enough. But there are household names out there who we know have tinnitus, because some of them have even called our helpline, but they won't talk about it. Not publicly.
Because they fear getting cancelled.
Absolutely. Music producers, well, if people think they can't hear the mix properly, they're not going to employ them. If people think they can't sing in tune because they've got, trouble hearing, are they going to get a gig? So there is that.
I suppose it's like a chef that can't smell, isn't it? It's a bit like,
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's a bit of a misconception, because you can do there's workarounds and you can pretty much do anything. And for a lot of people,
it is a misconception, because I think even with tinnitus, people could still sing in tune or make a mix properly. I can still cook a nice meal, even though I can't smell or taste. I can't, but I'm not worried about losing my job as a chef, because I'm not one.
But I mean, this is, I think this is the problem, and there aren't necessarily great role models out there. I mean, William Shatner, Captain Kirk, he has tinnitus.
Is that right?
Yeah, he's had it for a long time. I think it was caused by a stage pyrotechnic. He's one who was living with it. I mean, Beethoven almost certainly had tinnitus, and he did most of his greatest work after he went deaf.
That's the kind of statistic that you want. If it's good enough for Beethoven, if we could bring him back in an AI kind of way and say, look, if it's good enough for me, if I can do all these symphonies and I've got this.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean. I'm not being facetious. You're absolutely right. It does need good role models. It needs people to speak up. It needs people to take away that fear, take away that stigma, and show that you can live almost a pretty normal life with it. There's techniques to help it. You're not going to lose your job. You're not going bonkers. We've covered an awful lot on this show. You really have. We really have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things. I mean, on our website, we have a lot of real stories from people, and time again, we're told how valuable they are for people to actually see somebody like them who has perhaps come out the other side and who can be blindingly honest about some of the difficulties they've had and some of the low points they've had.
And the things they've discovered that might help the person that's just one step behind them,
Yeah. And so, it's part of a kind of, we're part of a kind of complex of support that's out there, because there is the professional support, there is our support, but the peer support is so important, knowing other people who are like it. And again, when we get asked on the helpline, a lot of people ask of us, do we have tinnitus and what's our experience, because they want to know that somebody understands.
I remember once friend of mine, he had a problem with, he was drinking too much, and he went for help, and he said to the counsellor, have you ever had this problem? Have you ever had this problem? It was almost like he needed, for his own reassurance, to know that the person that was going to help him had the same problem too. I'm not quite sure why we were wired that way, but it did seem to be a thing. And anything else you'd like to add? You've told us some fantastic stuff. I mean, I've learned an awful lot in the last 43 minutes.
Well, I know,
and you're doing great work. I mean, it's the work you're doing is, if in my humble opinion, is fantastic.
Thanks,
Nic,
Neil.
it really is.
No, I mean, I think we've kind of covered a lot. But if anybody does want to find out more, you've put the website and the helpline details up there, so they can get in touch and see. The other thing, because we do other things as well as supporting people. Obviously, we're based around. We've got a big prevention message, a big prevention section on our website. We support a lot of research, but I think the key thing for this, probably the key message for people, is you're not alone. There are things you can do. There's support out there, and actually we're fighting as well. And one of the reasons behind Tinnitus Week was to raise awareness and sort of encourage. We want to encourage greater investment in sort of the services, the professional services behind this. And the more people that band together to speak up about it, we're in a better position to do that.
Well, absolutely, because I think you touched on it earlier. It's not one of the most popular, if that's the right word. Why do you think if it's such a big problem, why do you think it's pushed aside in favour, and in favour of what gets more attention?
Well, I mean, hearing research in general is really quite misunderstood, and is the Cinderella, I think, of a lot of illnesses, and is under-resourced and under-researched. Some of that does come down, I think, to its invisibility. You can't tell if somebody has tinnitus. You can't tell, particularly with hearing aids these days, if somebody has a hearing loss. Also, I mean, I think we're at the stage where, for so long, people thought, well, tinnitus, it's not going to kill you. It's not got, what kind of impact does it have? And actually, we're beginning to say and realise that it has this big impact. And some of that, I think, is a great.
It has a big enough effect on your mental health.
Yeah, and I think some of this is coming down to the fact that these days we're much more open about mental health.
Yes,
much more open. And so I think the situation is changing, and certainly we're involved as a Department of Health and Social Care working party that I actually sit on, that's looking at how do we increase tinnitus research. So I think the situation is changing, and particularly now the situation with a lot of perhaps what I would call the more urgent health needs, the things that are life-threatening. We're in a lot better position to fix a lot of those than we were. So now let's start looking at the other things that affect people's quality of life as well as the length of their life.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. That's a really, really good answer. Yeah, we've come. Yeah, that's a great answer, Nic.
I think we've come a long way. So now let's.
So what's your vision? What's the big vision? The genie pops out the lamp and says, right, one wish to do with tinnitus. What would it be? What would your legacy be?
The legacy is a world where no one suffers from tinnitus. So that is either they don't get it in the first place, or if they have it, it's kind of a bit like, I wear glasses for short-sightedness. It's not affecting my life in any way, shape or form. It's there and it's not a problem. And that's where we'd like to be. So yeah, we'd like a cure. We'd like effective management techniques, but we'd like nobody to suffer.
Brilliant. Well, it's a lovely way to finish up the interview. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
What an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
It's been a joy to come on, and
keep in touch. Please keep in touch. Keep in touch, and I'm sure you'll be doing some big things in the future. Let us know. Please feel free to come on and talk about them again. Use this as your forum, because there is a mental health angle without question. We've established that.
Yeah.
But it's been absolutely lovely to have you on the show. If you'd like to learn more, 0800 018 0527. 0800 018 0527. That runs from 10 till 4 Monday to Friday. So that's really well staffed, actually, isn't it? Helpline at tinnitus.org.uk and www.tinnitus.org.uk with a bot called Axel. That's a very intuitive, friendly, non-annoying bot. Not annoying at all.
No.
Well, this is groundbreaking on many levels. I want to go and meet Axel now as the only non-annoying bot. That's what I'm going to do when I finish this. I'll be over there checking out Axel. It's been lovely, Nic. And please keep in touch.
Take care now. Bye.
All the best and take care. Bye-bye. Wasn't that great to have them on the show? How cool is that? How cool was that? Brilliant. How long we got left? 48 minutes into the show. So, just wanted to finish today by talking a bit more about Paul McKenna's new book, because the more of this hang on, before we go, most DJs in the music industry are hard of hearing because they have headphones on too loud early on. Yeah, I'm thinking, because I've been in quite a few loud venues in my time. Well, I like a bit of loud music. I don't know. Would I wear ear protectors though if I go and do a gig? I don't know. Probably should do. I don't know. It sometimes seems that everything fun is either illegal, immoral, dangerous, or fattening, doesn't it? But that's not to diminish the message earlier on. I'm sure there's perfectly viable solutions. Anyway, so we were talking about self-sabotage, and this is, as I say, can't take any credit for this book. It's Paul McKenna's new book, Success for Life, and basically what it is, it's 7 super states like states of being, states of thought and feeling that work really well for people, and he's got to stack them all on top of each other. So it's almost like a superpower when you've got this state on top of that state, and self-belief is a state, confidence is a state, health is a state. Once you've got these all stacked on top of each other, you're a fairly powerful being. It would take quite a lot to pull you down. And he talks about the power of a positive self-image here. And he also talks that the brain can be reprogrammed like a computer. And there is a technique in here. I mean, I'm not going to give away the farm. You need to buy the book. But there's a technique to step into I saw it here a second ago. Bear with me. Yeah, the brain can be reprogrammed just like a computer. This is it. And you can step into the life of someone who is an ultra achiever. So wait a minute. If there's someone that you really admire and really want to emulate, there's a process in NLP called modeling, which technically means you pretty much can do. And we either sabotage ourselves by going, oh, no, I can't, or we don't think big enough. If we think we can't do something, chances are we won't do it. We won't even try. So I do definitely recommend this book. And there's a lovely technique which I will share, I think. But do buy the book, because there's an awful lot of good stuff in there. It's a technique called the visual squash. And how can I? Yeah. So if you imagine your hands out in front of you, okay, and imagine on your left hand or on one hand, there's the part of you. And I'm not implying there's like lots of different things or people running around inside of you. There's aspects of our personality which we've all got, and on one part there's the part of you that wants to succeed and fulfill your potential. The part of you that possibly believes we're all unlimited potential. We can do anything. That's sort of the best part of us that knows it's all possible. And then the other part is it's not like so much, it's the one that's kind of scared, that's kind of don't push too far because it might be dangerous. I need to protect you. And often, as Paul McKenna says, a lot of self-sabotage is hiding behind a pattern of protection. It's trying to protect you from something. And a really good analogy is there's quite a busy road. I don't know, 50 meters from here. Really busy road. People got to 50 miles an hour on there and stuff, and lorries and everything. Now, I'm not scared that there's a road 50 meters away, but I've got a caution that I won't go and run in it. You know what I mean? So that's I don't need to have a phobic or terrified response when caution will do. And if caution will do, can we not trust that part of ourselves that if it needs to be there? It's just a question of not overreacting. It's a question of the appropriate response to a situation rather than something a bit over the top. It's like the sergeant saying, thank you for your service, but the war is no longer over, to the troops on the battlefield. And that is a true story, by the way, back in history some point. So, as I say, buy this book. Very, very good. So now imagine the two parts, one on each, okay? And bear in mind, they both got positive intentions. This one wants you to succeed, and this one wants to protect you, okay? And you can kind of see both their points of view, but if you put your hands together and kind of let them meld and percolate a little bit together, remember, if they've both got positive intentions, maybe they could learn to work together. Maybe a bit of a democracy could be formed here. Maybe it doesn't have to be a battle. You wouldn't have to waste all that energy, like putting your foot on the accelerator, then putting your foot on the brake. I want it, but I'm scared of it. I want it, but I'm scared of it. What about if you can just go, well, I trust myself that I can make the right decisions as I go along. Yes, I want that. And I'm just going to keep my foot on one pedal and make steady progress. Surely that's better than stop, start. And that's what this will do. It allows those two parts to integrate. Now, I will say, I'm just explaining the rudiments of it. You do need to buy the book. You need to do the exercises too. There's some downloads as well. And as I say, I take no credit for inventing these exercises or writing this book. That is entirely Paul McKenna and the people that invented NLP back in America in the late 60s. But isn't that a nice thought that possibly, like the lady said, people suffered for 30 years with tinnitus just because they didn't ask the right question. And it's like, oh God, but so this stuff that's held me back for years, I might be able to let it go. I might be able to see that it was just trying to protect me. And yet, like the soldiers on the battlefield, when the war is over, its services are no longer required. I can have a proportionate response. I can trust myself more. I can finally move forward and do what I want to do. Imagine that. Just imagine that. If you really were empowered to do what you wanted to do and succeed at it. What about other people? Well, what if they were allowed to do the same? I can think of worse ways to live, rather than what we've got at the moment, which is generally trying to manipulate the outer world, and probably some other people as well, to try and do what we need them to do so we can feel better. And it's a bit of a crappy strategy. It's not that it hasn't been tried for millennia, but it's just a little bit draining. It's a little bit exhausting. And I would contend there are better ways. I'll leave you with that thought for today. It's been great. How long we got? 4 minutes. Any comments? You've been rather quiet today on the old comments. No one's been saying very much today on the old comments. So any final comments? Judy Voice, are you still with us? Still listening to you through my Bluetooth hearing aids. There you go. Big up you with your Bluetooth. And Robert and Liz, that's the only people I can see in the comments today. So if you've got any more comments, and by the way, if there's anything you particularly want to talk about on the show, anything you want to explore, do let me know. Let me know. I've got some more great guests coming up, and I've got some ideas for some really quite interesting subjects. But it's not just what interests me. What interests you? What would you like to do a deep dive into? Maybe something that's really interested you for years. I've been thinking about getting some tantric sex people on the show. That might be interesting because there's a mental health connection there. Yeah. So I mean, I will. I'm not proud. Just let us know what you want to talk about, and we can talk about it. I missed most of the show. Sorry, I have tinnitus from COVID. I don't know if that's someone trying to be funny. Is that you, Graham? I'm sorry, there's someone that listens to this show regularly. That is just the kind of thing that he would write. And if you're being serious that you do have tinnitus from long COVID, I apologise, but I think you might be yanking my chain. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I'm sorry. Friday, Russ will be here with Phil Dave and Screen Queen, Chantal. That's not a joke. It's a long COVID thing. In that case, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. It's just that I've got someone that listens to the show regularly that makes comments exactly like that, and I've kind of learned to filter them out. But I was wrong on that, so I'm sorry. No offence intended. But you're very welcome. And yes, I'm aware that. Well, we were talking about it earlier on the show. If you missed it, Nick, our guest, they were saying that it can be connected to long COVID. So yes, most certainly. No problems. There we go. So we're all good. We're all friends. That's good. 2 minutes left, and I'll be back on Monday with Russ. Any final comments? Thoughts or comments? Thoughts or comments before we finish for the day? Got about 1 minute and 40 seconds. So if anyone would like to ask me anything, I'll be very, very happy to answer it as best I can in 1 minute and 40 seconds. Questions, comments? What would you like to talk about? Any guests you'd like me to get? Subjects you'd like to do a deep dive into? So we'll just sit here in awkward silence till I get a response. Or not. Do buy this book though. It's available on Amazon. It really is. It's. I think it's one of his best works. Yeah, I mean, all his work's been very, very good, but I think this is like the highlights of all his great work, put together and collated, and like the best of the best and all that sort of thing. We got a new one. Hello, John. Hello, Neil. Hello, man. How are you? Well, that is literally just about all we've got time for today. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. As I say, Russ and Chantal, Screen Queen, and Phil Dave are going to be here on Friday. I'll be here with Russ on Monday and then back by myself next Wednesday. If you want to get in touch with me, hit me up on Facebook, Neil Long DJ, or Facebook Messenger. Get in touch with me. neillong.com is my website if you'd like to get in touch for anything that I do, and we can have a chat off air. In the meantime, thank you so much for tuning in. It's been MRS, Men's Radio Station, and thanks for tuning in. It's been fun today. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Thanks to our guest Nic Wray from tinnitus.org.uk. Russ and Chantal and Phil will see you Friday. Lots of love. Bye-bye.